did it.
G.
Yes, sir. You got
I am
it.
a third legally. Should I put the third on there too?
If you don't mind, because they'll check the signature as according to your registration.
Yeah, I just upgraded
Perfect,
the
perfect.
driver's license. Or
Thank you.
The motor registration.
I appreciate that.
So,
I mean, it seems we can always be ornery, and
check with my Gold Star license or whatever it was. because-
hopefully.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Instead of taking 10 minutes, 4 hours and 2 trips.
Oh, my gosh. Wow, wow, wow. Okay.
Mark, are we ready?
I'm ready if you are.
All right. The clock on the wall is very close to 7 o'clock. My watch says 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
So if everyone is here, we'll call to order the Farragut Board of Zoning Appeals agenda for the town of Farragut for March 23, 2022 at 7 p.m. I'm Keith Alley. I serve as the chair. We have 2 items on the agenda for this evening. The first item is the approval of minutes for the July 28, 2021 meeting. Hopefully all the board members received a copy of the proposed minutes for July 28, 2021 in the package that was circulated digitally prior to our meeting tonight. Has everyone had an opportunity to look at that?
Yes, sir.
All right. I will entertain any motions with regard to approving that or amending that.
Move to approve?
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Then I'll call for a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes for July 28, 2021, please affirm by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Then the second item we have on our agenda for this evening is a public hearing on a request for a special exception to use a manufactured building for a temporary classroom in relation to a proposed renovation at the Farragut Christian Church, 138 Admiral Road, zoned R-1. Hickory Construction is the applicant. We will be happy to hear from both the applicant and from the town's representative. Mr. Shipley, if you would, I know that it will be helpful for the board because we don't hear too many special exceptions
No.
to talk about the authority of the board with regard to special exceptions at some
Okay.
point in your presentation.
Yeah, this is this is kind of a unique one, even as a special exception. We have some provisions in our zoning ordinance that allow for the temporary use of a manufactured modular building as part of church renovations and expansions or hospital renovations and expansions. Then there are certain parameters that I'll talk about here in a minute, but this is the Farragut Christian Church. It's off of Admiral Road. Admiral Road is over here on the left of the screen. And so you got the parking lot here, and then this is the building. And then their proposed manufactured temporary building would be back here in this, off of this part of the parking lot. And pretty discreet location, frankly. What they're doing is they were going to do an expansion, an exterior expansion, but that may be later in the future. They actually had a site plan that came to the Planning Commission about a year and a half ago for an expansion. They're not doing that. Instead, they're going to be doing a renovation, an interior renovation, no expansion on the outside, but that renovation will affect some existing classrooms. And so they need a temporary space for people to conduct, their classrooms and while they're doing the renovation on the interior of the existing building. So the request is to allow for, and this is kind of some pictures of the church from Admiral Road. This is what the church looks like. So their request is to allow a special exception for a manufactured building. It would be 28 feet wide by 68 feet long, similar in appearance to what's on the screen there. In Chapter 4 of the zoning ordinance, there's a section that deals with manufactured and modular building units, and churches can and hospitals can apply for a special exception that would be reviewed by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the criteria on which the board would base its review. There's 4 criteria listed. The first is that the unit is architecturally compatible and maintained compatible with the principal building. They're proposing to paint the building a color that would be similar to some colors, predominant colors that are on the church itself. So, there's a couple of earth tone colors on the church, and they would basically propose to paint the building, one of those two color types. Then secondly, the units have to be underpinned and then meet all applicable building safety and fire code requirements, because obviously these will be subject to a certificate of occupancy. There'll be people in there, so we have to make sure that it's going to be safe. Third is that the wheels and the tongues and everything that's used to transport the unit to the site are removed. And it's basically, underpinned and has a skirting around it so that it doesn't look like, as much like a manufactured building. And then that the building is removed upon completion of the, in this case, the renovation. They estimate that the renovation will be about a 6 to 8 month process, which is pretty short. We've had these temporary buildings used at a couple of different churches and then also at Tenova Hospital in the past. It's been several years ago. And on the churches were actually, their buildings were there for a much longer period of time. There's a provision in the ordinance that if it's there more than a year, they have to come before you all and get a renewal on an annual basis, and it can be in place for up to 4 years potentially. But that's not their plan. Their plan is to be finished in 6 to 8 months and have it removed from the site. It's also an area that's in a pretty discrete location of the site. Based on what they're requesting and where they're proposing the building and the measures that they're proposing to take to address the criteria in which the board reviews these matters, the staff would recommend approval of this special exception. They will be, meeting all the 4 conditions and subject to them, following through with that and complying with those conditions, and with the understanding that, this is a 6 to 8 month condition on the property. Again, we do support the special exception. I'll just show you that location again. Again, this is where the building would be. It'd be probably hard to see, frankly, from Admiral Road. I mean, I guess you could see it as you're coming down the hill going north, but if you're going south on Admiral, I don't think you would see it. You'd probably be by it before you could even see it. Does anybody have any questions? I do have one citizen that asked to speak on this, and I think a representative from the applicant is here if you have any questions for them.
Certainly. Any board members have any questions for Mr. Shipley at this time?
I have a couple for Mark. The first one is there any precedent that's being set by this that we should be considering as we review this for our approval?
Well, I mean, anybody that wants to do this has to follow the same criteria. So, we feel that they will be following that. And also in this case, it's not like it's out there right by the roadway. It's kind of removed from the street. It's not very visible. They are going to paint it. There's no way you're going to make a building, like this look like the principal building. So we just have to use some logic and reason here. And if they're willing to paint it to match some color on the building and meet those other 3 conditions, then we're pretty comfortable with it. And anybody else that wanted to do something similar in the town, I think they would be treated the same way. So, yeah, that should be fine.
When you say anybody else, you mean a hospital or a church?
Yeah, anybody that would meet the criteria in the ordinance, yeah.
Okay. And my second question, I was going to ask if there's been any feedback or response from neighbors, and perhaps that's what the person who's going to speak tonight is addressing.
I have not heard any comments from any neighbors about it. So again, it's a temporary condition, and it really would be, even in their location, it's over kind of on the creek side. So really, there's not any neighbors to the south back here. So, the church building itself would pretty much screen anything from the nearest neighbor to the north up here. So I don't personally see any impact to the neighbors at all with this.
Any further questions from any other board members for Mr. Shipley? All right, then it's customary to hear from the applicant, Hickory Construction. If you would like to present anything, if you would please go to the podium and provide us with your name and address, and then feel free to just tell us what you'd like to tell us.
My name is Harold Spencer. I'm the project manager for this project for the church. My address is 2910 Cathy Drive in Kodak, Tennessee. Mark has thoroughly covered the facts, in my opinion. The church just needs some functionality to continue their programming. Maybe they have multiple projects, which honestly I'm not very well suited to speak to since I'm not a member. But ones that were mentioned were such as Mother's Day Out, some youth programming, some things that happen where this space would be needed for them. And it is in the planning of this work, if their hope is to be able to use this space because they need some type of functionality. And if it were to not be approved, the church would plan to reapply to do some phasing of the work, the renovations, because they basically just can't operate without at least some usable space in the area that we're renovating.
Let me ask this. Generally speaking, as the representative for the applicant, would you assert or affirm that this structure is going to be painted in such a way as to try and blend in with the primary structure with that same color scheme? Is that the goal?
Absolutely. We thought that it seemed feasible to pick one of the stucco colors or possibly match the brick if that were your preference. We don't mind to do that at all. We've talked to the church members and the representatives, and they are aware.
And will Hickory Construction be doing the underpinning and making sure it meets all applicable building safety and fire codes?
We'll have a supervisor there, and subcontractors to do the work, sir.
Okay. And does this type of unit require wheels, tongues, and other appurtenances to get it there, or?
It does.
All right,
It
so
does.
those will all be removed once it's
Absolutely.
installed? And as far as removing this building, it is the applicant's plan to move it within a period of time. It sounded like around 8 months, but when the construction or renovation inside is complete, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, I really don't have any further questions of the applicant. Do any other board members have any questions?
Yes, sir.
No, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
All right, and my understanding is that we have someone who would like to speak at this point. If you would please stand at the podium, state your name and your address, and just tell us what you'd like us to know.
David White, 314 Vista Trail in Bel Air. I don't have any issue with the building whatsoever being there. My concern is the temporary, and Mark covered when the building was to be removed. But unfortunately, that's still kind of open-ended. It's my humble opinion that there should be a little more definite time in the approval, not just in the conditions. And the reason I say that, we have another situation in town where a church had a temporary situation in 2008. It still exists today. So temporary can go on forever. I think a simple solution would be that prior to a certificate of occupancy being issued for the improvements, that the building must be moved. I think that would probably solve it, but it needs to be a little more definite than an open-ended thing, 4 months, 8 months, 1 year, 2 years, 4 years. Or you get in a situation like we're in now with something being there for 20 years and it's still temporary. So that's my only comments.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, sir. Mr. Shipley, just briefly, the board could certainly make the approval of the special exception contingent upon all 4 criteria being met, as has been asserted will be done, and upon the temporary structure being removed no later than 1 year from the date of approval, or requiring that they come before the board as they have to do anyway.
Yeah, they would have to by ordinance anyway if
Yeah.
it goes beyond a year
Okay.
for
So-
this kind of building.
So we
Yeah.
could set that at a year, that it must be removed within a year, at which point they need to come before the board if it, for whatever reason, is not removed within a year anyway. And that would basically have the effect of removing the special exception automatically if it's not renewed within a year and if the building is not removed. So that might be a way to remedy that.
Okay. That's up to you all if you want to make that as part of your decision. That's certainly your prerogative to do that.
Sure. Do any board members have any questions of the town or the applicant or anyone else?
I'd like to follow up with the suggestion that was made by the, by the gentleman who just spoke. Could removal be tied to the issuance of the occupancy permit? So we don't get into a cascading situation. Well, now we need it for another project, and now we need it for another project. Because I understand his
Yeah, I
frustration
see
about
what
it
you're
going
saying.
on for forever.
Do they have to have a certificate of occupancy for a renovation on an existing building? So they'll need to apply, get that, and then have the building removed. We can make it contingent upon X amount of days within, obtaining the certificate of occupancy.
I would say a permanent certificate of occupancy because they may want to, there may be a logistical issue that if they really need a permanent CO to legally occupy the new space, and then there might be a week or 2 delay. We could issue a temporary certificate of occupancy with that one of the conditions being that within 30 days, that before we can issue the permanent certificate of occupancy, that manufactured building would have to be removed.
Sure.
We could do that with the CO.
Yeah.
Or you could just, if you wanted to stipulate the 1 year, no more than a year, that's up to you all as well. But a lot of times we'll have a temporary and a permanent CO to allow people time to kind of coordinate a move from one space to another.
Okay.
And then, it's just sometimes there's some logistical issues that maybe they still have some things in the temporary structure
Sure.
that they might need to migrate into the new space,
So having timing after the permanent certificate of occupancy is issued to allow them time, and also weather. I mean, sometimes
Yeah,
it's difficult
that's
to
right.
get a large
It
structure
might be hard to
out.
get the building out of there.
Yeah.
Maybe something comes up and it could be an issue. So I'd be a little bit leery about, we could certainly tie the permanent certificate of occupancy to that.
30 days seems
think
harsh to
that's-
me. 90 days seems more reasonable. In terms of 90 days from the applicant's perspective, and I don't want to make you have to get back up, but if you talk, you probably do because it's being recorded. But I'm interested in knowing, do you think 90 days, generally speaking, from the time a permanent certificate of occupancy is enough time to get that building out of there? And I'm going to, for the record, show that the applicant is nodding an affirmation positively, so he doesn't have to stand up again. All right. thank you.
Normally, we issue a temporary, typically for anywhere from 2 weeks to 30 days.
Okay.
So, and that probably will give them enough time to get that out of there, because they know they'll need to plan ahead and know that that's something that we expect,
Of
Question, where will the new structure be built? And will it be a freestanding structure, or will it be
It's just renovation.
tied into the main building?
It's a renovation inside.
This is all just interior renovation right now.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Now, they did get a site plan conditionally approved about 1.5 years ago for an addition, but they're, due to budgetary, considerations, they're trying to just phase stuff. So this is all an interior project at this point.
Mark, I think the only comment I have is I appreciate the residents' comments. I think that the ordinance is pretty self-explanatory, that there is a 4-year time limit.
Yeah.
I want to be gracious because I know what it's like to have to do renovations when certain items are floating out in the Pacific Ocean because of shipping issues. And so while I appreciate that we need to make sure that we are cognizant of time, time limits, I think that the ordinance already speaks to that. So I'm more comfortable with just approving, subject to whatever items in the ordinance that need to be met. And for whatever reason, I hate to say this, don't want to be negative, but I suspect I will probably see you again in a year, perhaps, depending on how our supply chain is functioning. I think that we need to be very, very cognizant of that. We have this ordinance for a reason, to support charitable causes such as hospitals and churches. And so I want to make sure that we give this church the flexibility they need to get the renovation done in a very difficult economic situation that we're in right now as a country.
All right, do
And I
any
would be curious to know what church you're referring to, but you can tell me afterwards, because I like to know, because that's not okay. It's not okay. So I didn't know that. I've not seen it. So, but that's
It's
a
not a
sidebar.
manufactured building that he's
Okay.
talking about.
Okay. Yeah.
Do any of the board members have any questions for either Mr. Shipley or the applicant or our citizen?
I've got a question for Scott, if I can ask him a
Oh, goodness
question.
gracious.
You can certainly talk with him. I don't know if you can legitimately ask him a question.
Go for. I'll have an answer.
I'll have another question.
Okay, great.
Help me understand where the issue comes from tying to the certificate of occupancy. I understand the supply chain issue big time, but help me understand why you wouldn't want to tie removal to some amount of time after the certificate of occupancy would be granted.
And I have to go back and look at the ordinance. I don't know if the ordinance has that language in it or not. I think I would prefer to have less stipulations and follow the ordinance, because I think the ordinance is pretty straightforward, in that no matter what, you have to be here a year from now if you have to extend it, and we can say no at that time. And what I'm trying, one of my goals in the town of Farragut is to make sure that we are supportive of businesses and charities that are trying to better their buildings. And so I'm not, while I appreciate the idea, I think that the ordinance is pretty self-explanatory, that it has to be gone in a year.
So,
But that's my thought.
and to clarify, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Shipley, but basically, we don't have the power to grant a special exception for beyond 1 year without them coming back
That's
to
right.
reapply.
Yeah, for this kind of building, that's right.
Period.
That's right.
And we don't have the power to renew a special exception beyond a total of 4 years.
Correct.
So,
That's right.
So as a practical matter, we have a 1-year limit that this thing is either going to be completed and removed, or they're going to be back here by statute.
Yes,
Because
that's
the
right.
special exception is going to expire.
That's right.
And we don't have the power to grant a special exception for any period beyond 4 years, after which whatever we do would expire as a matter of the ordinance
Yes, sir.
on its face.
That's my
So
thought.
there's going to be an opportunity for a few renewals to get to that 4-year period. But if it's not gone in 4 years, then the town is free to do whatever the town does when some special exception expires, is my understanding. So you don't need to create anything in addition to that unless you have a unique concern that would cause you concern. But
And I appreciate the idea. I really do. It's just I want to make it as easy as possible for you all to get your renovations done within the right amount of time. And just I want to recognize that we're in a tough economic situation and supply chain issues are at hand. And I want to be just not have to give you all something else to worry about, honestly. So,
Sure. And Chair recognizes the citizen again. You're up here to say things. Tell us what your thoughts are.
Well, to address this gentleman, we all want to be charitable. We all want to give a church, as well as anybody, proper respect. But I just told you from experience, leaving something open-ended does not work.
so
You
I
take
appreciate that.
2008
Yes, sir.
to
So-
to 2022, when it's basically the same situation. We had a temporary situation. It was spelled out in the ordinance that it was temporary, and it's still there. And the town is powerless to do anything about it right now. So things
Mayor,
happen.
so-
Why not take care of it in the beginning? If you
So
tie it
I
to the
appreciate what
certificate
you're
of
saying.
occupancy, then everybody knows that before they can occupy that building, they have to move this building. Anything can happen.
Mm-hmm.
It could stay there 4 years, but why?
So I'm not familiar with what church you're talking about, and it should not be submitted in part of our decision. The decision should be based on the information that was given to us in the packet. So while I appreciate what you're saying, I've already offered the opportunity to talk to you after the meeting, because I would like to know what church you're referring to, because if it really truly is a temporary building that is,
It's not a temporary building, it's a temporary situation.
okay, well, I appreciate that.
But
That's not,
besides that, they do
Yes.
have 3 buildings on site too.
Okay.
That have been there for years.
Okay.
That are temporary.
so I appreciate that. I do appreciate your concern. Thank you. And I think the issue that I hear you bringing about tonight is remedied by the 4-year limitation.
Well, it's
with this
not,
board.
so why don't you understand that you could do one little thing and solve the problem?
So I'm not going to have a dialogue with you. I appreciate your input. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any further questions from any board members? All right. Would anyone like to, at this point, make a motion? Board will entertain any motions.
So can I move to approve, subject to the requirements of the ordinance? I just need the ordinance number, Mark. That the requirements of the ordinance are met.
Appendix A, zoning, Chapter 4.
I don't have my packet with me. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Thank you.
Section
Remember this.
26.
Okay.
And you're talking about
Okay.
the 4 requirements
The
that
four
are
requirements,
itemized.
yes, thank you. So Appendix A, zoning, Chapter 4, Section
26.
26. So I move that the applicant receives approval for the temporary structure as outlined in Appendix A, zoning, Chapter 4, Section 26.
All right, and with the understanding that the applicant will be meeting those 4 specified requirements as has been testified under oath today.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And, I will tell you that I don't recall swearing you in. So if we can do this, we haven't done this in so long. If I can swear you both in quickly, we'll just get that on the record retroactively. That is totally my fault.
It's been a while since we've done
It
this.
has
It's
been.
kind of rusty.
Usually I have a bailiff to do this, and I feel but, all right. Do you swear or affirm that everything you've already presented to the board or will present to the board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, sir.
All right, thank you. And may I please have you do the same thing? Do you swear or affirm that everything you've already presented or will present to the board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, and Mr. Shipley, technically I have to have you do it too. Swear or affirm, everything is truth, whole truth, nothing?
Yes, I do.
All right, very good, thank you. All right, well, we've cleared that up. All right, so I have a motion that the special exception be approved, subject to the applicant meeting the requirements as outlined in the application and the specific zoning chapter, and that the compatibility be done by the painting that was described earlier by the applicant, and that all the other requirements, the underpinning, the wheels and tongues being removed and the structure be removed, be met. Do I have a second?
I second.
All right. Do I have any discussion?
I have one point of discussion. Mark, is there any bond or whatever that holds them responsible for getting it taken care of?
Removal. No, I mean, we haven't really used those in the past, I don't believe. I mean, if you want to stipulate them providing a a letter of credit for removal, that's up to you all if you want to add that.
I'm just trying to think through what could go wrong with this, and one is that, for
Well,
whatever
I
reason,
think,
there's, somebody
you
says,
know,
"Well, I
you,
can't
like
afford
I
it."
said earlier, if they're still not, if it's still out there in a year, they're going to have to come back here and tell you why it's still there. And at that point, if there's a concern, then, you know, and you can do whatever you want to tonight, but it might be, maybe, I would probably look at a letter of credit if they aren't finished in a year, of providing one. But, you know, the testimony here is that they intend to be finished and have that off-site in 6 to 8 months. So, you know, we could always, you know, we have the certificate of occupancy and things that we can do. We would not issue a permanent certificate of occupancy until this is removed. I can tell you that, because I'm over that department. But we would want to work with the church on the timing, you know, so that we want to be reasonable with them. So it may be very likely a situation where there's a temporary issued for a short period of time, 2 weeks, a month, and then before the permanent one could be issued, that would have to be removed from the property. So we have leverage, you know, that because they want to get their permanent certificate of occupancy, you know, so that they can legally occupy that modified space. So I think we're probably covered with that. And if this is dragged out for another year, then I think a letter of credit might make a little bit more sense. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any further discussion from any of the board members? All right, I have a motion and a second. I will call for a vote. Please affirm by saying aye. All in favor of approving the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? All right, motion carries. And congratulations. Thank you for your application. With that, we are at the conclusion of our agenda for the evening, and I thank you very much for a concise presentation, and I thank you for your time. Have a good evening.